remember Oscar Wilde said it resist everything except temptation. It's like we can continually adapt in order to maintain a conservative core of stuff that doesn't change at all. And we do this is what admiration is about very often. In order to keep hold of the 10-acre farm in Mayo for one son, the other 5 sons will have to go to every corner of the globe. The daughters, of course, didn't even matter. This kind of process of conservative adaptation, paradoxical, but the political system is absolutely extraordinary. That you had this very, very rapid transformation in all aspects of Irish society, and at the same time you had political culture which not only didn't change but actually reinforced itself in all its worst habits. And one of those habits, I would suggest, was the incredible tolerance for corruption. It's important to say, because we sometimes sort of give ourselves a very hard time over this at one level, that I don't think Ireland is uniquely corrupt as a Western society. I think Italy is probably worse than us. And there are, you get huge scandals in the financing of political parties in Germany, for example, which we tend to hold up as a very ethical sort of society. You get huge scandals in the States, you get huge scandals. Look at the MP's expenses in Britain. What's distinctive about Ireland, and has been distinctive throughout all this period, was impunity. Most other societies, the sort of rule is, if you get caught, we will make an example of you, because you have to maintain the notion, at least, that there is right and wrong and that there are rules. The specific nature of Irish political culture was you could get caught and it didn't matter. There was complete impunity for corruption, for white-collar crime, to the extent that white-collar crime is an oxymoron in Ireland. Crime is what's committed by fellas with buzz cuts and hoodies and trainers. It's not what's committed by people in nice suits. And the extent of impunity is absolutely extraordinary. You look at every level in terms of the political and corporate cultures of Ireland, and you see this extraordinary capacity to get away with whatever. From massive tax evasion, for example. The number of people who ever get prosecuted for tax evasion in Ireland is tiny, and particularly the number of people at a very high level who ever get prosecuted is absolutely tiny, even though we've had huge organised tax evasion going on. In terms of corporate governance, in terms of the ways of doing business, insider trading, for example, it now appears not to be a crime in Ireland at all. But particularly in political terms, bribery, corruption, those kinds of crimes really have had no impact at all. So 10 years ago, if you'd asked somebody like me, what would happen if the Irish people knew that Charlie Haughey was a crook? What would happen if they knew that Bertie Ahern was on the take? What would happen if they knew that Michael Lowry had massively evaded his taxes and had huge offshore accounts which he then lied about with Doyle? I would have naively said, well, actually things will change. There will be a fundamental shift in Irish political culture. We will begin to demand different kinds of standards. And what happened in a way is actually much worse than not having revelations. There's only one thing worse actually than all of this stuff going on in secret, which is all of it going on in public. And really what happened was, we revealed it all. I mean, actually, in some ways, the media has a lot to answer for around this, but a lot of journalists did very good work, and a lot of stories broke, and a lot of those stories forced the establishment of tribunals, which, follow the money, and we now have a huge amount of detail about all this sort of stuff. And nothing happened. There was no outcome. And that's extraordinarily dangerous in terms of a business culture, a political culture, a way of using power. Because if you put yourself in the position of being one of these people, if it hasn't been revealed, there's always the fear that it might be revealed and that you might pay a penalty. If it has been revealed and nothing's happened, you know you can get away with anything. And that was the lesson that was really learned by a huge amount of that nexus between business and politics in Ireland, which was that you get away with it. Just look at take a simple example of this, which I find kind of pretty extraordinary. Two guys called the Bailey brothers, Mick and Tom. And we can say this because legally, all of this stuff is well established. Mick and Tom, biggest house builders in Ireland, incredibly wealthy individuals, very strong supporters of Fianna Fáil, very much involved in that Fianna Fáil nexus, turn up at the tent in the Galway races, all that stuff. I mean, we know, for example, that they paid no tax at all as the biggest house builders in Ireland for nearly 20 years. And then they eventually made settlements with the revenue for about 22 million. But there was no prosecutions for not paying tax. Now, as an enormous business entity, you don't just happen not to pay tax. It has to be pretty well organised. No legal consequences whatsoever. We know that they perjured themselves under oath. The Catholic Tribunal found they perjured themselves under oath at that tribunal, and both happened to perjure themselves in the same way, which suggests that they might have conspired to do this. And we know that they engaged in bribery. They bribed rape workers, government ministers at the time. Now, it would be pretty extraordinary in most societies to get away with one of those crimes. It's absolutely extraordinary to get away with all three. And also, the revelation of all that had no effect on their business, no effect on their political connections, no effect on the way they operate whatsoever. And you'd be pleased to know we're still giving them money, by the way, through Anglo-Irish Bank for some of their projects in England. So, they remained very much within the sort of nexus of the great and the good in Ireland. And this happened at a level which I think was toxic. The reason it was toxic was, and you have to understand quite a simple thing, which was, you think about the effect on regulation, on how the system is supposed to be governing what's happening in our banks, for example. We know in great detail that at least two, and there were others, but just say two huge criminal conspiracies in Ireland in the 1980s and early 1990s run within the financial services system. There was the dirt scandal, whereby effectively every financial institution in Ireland decided to collude with its customers in not paying a tax. Absolutely extraordinary. And decided to do this through massive organised fraud. This involved every single person who asked for this being given a fraudulent facility, which was you could walk in off the street in Killarney or Mallow or Athlone or Dublin or wherever into, say, a local branch of Anglo-Irish Bank, Allied Irish Bank, and you could say, I don't live here. You might be the local shopkeeper, you might be the local farmer, you might be the local publican. You say, I don't live here, I live in London. Oh, fine. Fill out this form, say you live in London. You are a non-resident, therefore you don't pay this tax. This was done, like you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in an entirely systematic way, defrauding the state of tens and hundreds of millions of pounds at the time. Now, the thing was, is not simply that it was going on, but that the authorities knew about it. So the Department of Finance knew about it, the Central Bank, which was the financial regulator at the time, knew about it in quite a lot of detail. And they turned a blind eye to it. Part of the reason they turned a blind eye to it is you can get the sense of the culture from, say, the other sort of huge criminal conspiracy, which was the Ansbacher fraud, which was a kind of high-level, souped-up version of the dirt fraud, which was for the elite. So a lot of the elite, the business and political elite, were involved in this kind of bogus non-resident thing of claiming to have their money in Cayman Islands when it was really here, and again avoiding tax and hiding hot money, essentially. Now, imagine yourself in the central bank, right, which was the regulator at the time, and you discover this fraud. You then discover three other things. You discover that the Ansbacher fraud is being organised by a guy called Des Traynor, who is, if you are at all streetwise, you very quickly discover, if you start asking around, is Charlie Hawley's accountant, bagman. It's also, by the way, running the biggest single company in the Irish Stock Exchange, Cement Road Holdings. You then discover that one of the main customers of this fraud is Charlie Mahoney himself, who was Taoiseach at the time. And you then discover that one of your own directors in the central bank, a guy called Ken O'Reilly Highland, is also a customer of Bank. Now, the point I'm making is that in that circumstance, if you are a regulator, you need to be an absolutely saintly and heroic individual to take on something like that. Because you know now that the way things work in this country is through connections.